If you continue to live life the way you're living it right now for the rest of your life, would that be satisfying to you? When we're in this doing and we're burning ourselves up, we cannot hold the space for exponential growth. And this is very often where we get to this place and we hit this wall, and what we've done doesn't work for us anymore. Powerful people say yes when they mean yes, and they say no when they mean no. And that's the same thing that people are receiving from your energy. So does your energy say no when you mean no and yes when you mean yes? Or do you show up and you're saying yes, but your energy's saying no?
Hey there, rich and joyful entrepreneurs. We are so glad to have you with us here today. I have one of my very close friends and my mentor, Michael Edwards, here today. I've been working with Michael for the last few months, and he has absolutely helped me to transform. So I don't know if you guys have noticed a shift or change in me, but Michael has helped me through so many things, and I just wanted to bring him in to share some of his magic with you. So I will let Larissa share a little bit more about Michael, but welcome, welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Erica, for the beautiful intro. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another one of our mind-blowing masterclasses. Today, we are joined by the amazing Michael Edwards, who is a speaker, healer, mentor, and coach. Michael uses hypnosis and his deep understanding of human beings to work with the conscious and subconscious mind, as well as deep emotions and energetics in order to help his clients heal from trauma, break through limitations, and catapult towards massive growth, happiness, and success. Michael trained with world-renowned therapist and author Marissa Peer in her groundbreaking method of hypnotherapy called RTT, and has been referred to by Marissa as one of her proteges. Using powerful intuition, infectious positive energy, and a special kind of magic that he brings to every interaction, Michael incorporates a broad range of tools ranging from hypnosis and mindset coaching to meditation and spirituality. We are so excited to have him join us here today to share his expertise in accessing our inner magic. Let's give a warm welcome to the fantastic Michael Edwards.
Oh my goodness, that introduction. Thank you so much. Hello, gorgeous human beings. My name is Michael Edwards. It's funny, I feel like I should introduce myself, but that was already quite the introduction. So I will just dive in. And what my work has really become is helping very successful, high performing, high achieving people really access their true potential. And a lot of that comes from breaking through things that come up that subconsciously hold us back. When we're creative, our emotions are such a big piece of who we are. They literally change the way we behave, the way we show up, the way we hold ourselves, the way we operate, the way we perceive what is possible for us and not possible for us. And very often what happens is because we grew up in this world that's so hyper focused on the material, on what we see, we either consciously or unconsciously look at that as being a much lower priority. It's like self-care, the way that I feel, whatever, doesn't really matter. But here's the thing, it literally reshapes who you are and how you show up. And so what a lot of us do in entrepreneurship is we hustle and grind and we add more things, and our emotional resource goes down and down and down. And we feel like we have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And then we get into this place where we don't really understand. A lot of people will say, I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel. I feel like I'm just spinning and I don't know how to break through this. What I want you to reflect on for a moment is the difference in what it feels like in your body to go to Walmart and to go to Cartier. If you imagine going to Walmart, it's like busy, no one really cares if you're there, like it is not the vibe. Whereas if you go somewhere like Cartier, you're assigned a person to give you an experience in the store. A lot of the designer stores that I shop at, I have the person in my phone and they'll text me. And this lady from Burberry knew that I was looking for, I think it was a cream coat with black buttons and they didn't have it. So whenever they get anything in like that, she texts me and she's like, hey, Michael, la, 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 we have this thing. It's such a different relationship. When we are looking to match with the people who are going to be our clients, we match based so much on that, who we are and how we show up. I've seen so many times where people execute a strategy and they'll put out a huge volume of content, but the energy behind it isn't a match for who and what they're talking about. And so it just doesn't connect. There's so many times people will say, I'm doing all the things, but it's not happening. And very often when we do this inner work and we light up, and when Erica says, I don't know if you see me as any different, I see such a huge difference. Here she is like sunshine on the screen. I can feel it coming through. And I know that that has translated to big changes in her business. But that is the thing that draws people in. And when I work with clients, they light up from the inside and they're at the mall or a coffee shop or some random event, and they end up finding this huge client that's an up level for them because so much of it is this energy of who we are. We often have a lot of stories about how people were just drawn to us or we just connected with people. And then as we got more and more into the business and the structure and the selling, the more we did, the less result that we got. So much of that has to do with your energy. And this so often is something that we consciously understand, but we bargain with ourselves. We go, yeah, but I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that later. Let me just get through this month and then I'll be good. Let me just do this thing tonight and then let me push. And what I want to say is that's the problem. That thought cycle that goes in your head, that is the root of the weed in your garden that you need to rip out. You've got to interrupt yourself in the patterns that are actually creating the state of being that you're in now. I would ask you this. Is the state of being and the life experience that you're having right now, if you had that forever, would you be satisfied with that? If you continue to live life the way you're living it right now for the rest of your life, would that be satisfying to you? Just answer that question honestly, because I think a lot of the time we live our lives in a way that is depleting. It's not nourishing. And we tell ourselves this lie that I'm going to change when, I'll be happy when, I'll stop grinding so hard when, and that when never comes. I know for myself, I thought once I got to multi six figures in my business, that would just change everything. No more stress and no more problems. And it would just be easy street. But what actually happens is we tend to compound what we already have. And when we can learn to live and operate in a different way, then we're able to compound that instead of compounding the stress and all of the things. One of the things that I want us to play with is this idea of kind of having different states of being. If you've ever watched Tony Robbins, he talks a lot about state dependent things. Listening to him the other day, and he was saying, can a nice person be mean? And it's like, yes, when they're in a mean state. Can a mean person be nice? Yes, when they're in a nice state. And we have these literal states in our body. In the circles that I run in, we call this frequency. Frequency is being really aware of the emotional, energetic state in your body. You can probably identify with this. And there's times when you're in the dreamer mode and you think about your business and you're like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to work with the queen and infinite possibilities and it's all going to be the magic, right? And you feel unstoppable. And then you have these other times very often where you're in the nitty gritty or the result that you want is not coming and you feel so heavy and weighed down by things. When you look at what's possible, it's completely different when you're in those two states. We want to get better at getting ourselves into the state of possibility before we look at our life. Depending on where we are in our journey, we've got to build an awareness around these different parts of ourselves. And so I like to use this analogy of the king, the queen, and Merlin. If we think about this, and there's a kingdom, like a magical kingdom from fairy tale, the king is the one who builds the kingdom. The king is the one who gets the army together and storms the castle. He deals with things like, where are we sending the armies? Do we have enough grain for the winter? The king builds the kingdom. The king deals with the day-to-day. But then the queen holds this position. She is like the amplifier of the energy of royalty. She's regality. She deals with relationships. She does all of these things in politics that are behind the scenes. She influences the king in really important things, but people don't go to her and they're like, ma'am, where should we send this month's supply of grain? The queen's like, I don't have time for this. Get out of this. This is nonsense. And then Merlin is this energy of infinite possibilities. He makes the impossible possible. What we have to understand is that this visionary part of ourselves, this part of ourselves that sees the big picture and holds the energy of being the creative genius that we are, being the entrepreneur, is at a different level energetically than the version of us that actually builds the empire and does the day-to-day. And where we get really messed up is that we have this visionary Queen Merlin part of ourselves. That's the one that came up with the dream. That's the one that plays in possibilities. But then we have all of this shit that has to be done in order to build our kingdom. And so we drop into the king energy in the day-to-day. And what happens is we stay there. We start living our whole lives there. And we never go back up into this place of possibilities and identity. And so we start to kill our own magic. And we're like, why am I a grumpy king with no queen and no Merlin? That's the vibe. That's how we're living our life, because we forget that we are all three. In the earlier stages of business, what tends to happen is we're actually more intuitively in the dreaming, in the visionary. I have this vision, I have this dream, I'm going to do these things. And we're trying to get the day-to-day working, and it's hard. And very oftentimes in the beginning, we actually have to learn to be more of the king. We have to learn consistency, to learn to reply to emails, to implement systems, to execute the systems that we've implemented. We've got to learn how to deliver. We've got to learn how to price things properly. We've got to do all the things. And so when we're in this stage, in the do it ourselves, what we've got to do is get into the visionary magic possibility energy. And then we've got to give ourselves instructions. I used to sit down on a Monday to create content, and I would sit there 9 a.m. This is my content creation time. What the fuck do I say? I had ideas all weekend. I was at the vineyard and I was like, oh, I'm going to write about this on Monday. They're gone. And then I waste the time because I'm like, this is supposed to be my creative time to have nothing to create. If I work every day and I'm always in this doing hustle energy, then I never get to be up in that space. So making sure that I can get up into this Queen Merlin energy, this visionary space. And these things come in very often when I'm resting or when I'm doing something fun, like, oh, I could talk about this. Oh, I could talk about that. Really taking this, capturing it, and giving myself the instructions for when I'm the king. And then I'm going to now execute. Now it's time to build the kingdom. I've given myself the instructions, execute, execute, execute. And then you need a hard barrier where it's like, okay, 5 p.m. comes around, I'm done. Because if I spend my entire week as the king doing, then I actually am nothing on the weekend. I'm like a crusty, empty shell that just needs to sleep, and nothing comes to me as good. But then there comes a point later, generally when we get to high 6 figures, have 7 figures, and it's the opposite thing. We've used all of the tools that we know, we've built. It's like, now we have a kingdom. Now we need to rule it instead of run it ourselves. And so for a lot of us, we need to move much more into this visionary overseer place. We need to make sure that we have the support, that we're hiring the social media manager, the VA, all of the pieces that come into place, and that we're not just taking the amount of work that we've done and doubling it in order to double our revenue. That doesn't work. And so it's kind of this weird inverse relationship, because in the beginning, we tend to just be very intuitively very visionary. And then we've got to really go into this season of doing more. And then there comes this time and we've got to be so intentional. It's all about the Queen and Merlin later on. It's all about that. It's you in your magic, doing your gift, being seen, and holding this field of possibilities. Because when we're in this doing and we're burning ourselves up, we cannot hold the space for exponential growth. And this is very often where we get to this place and we hit this wall, and what we've done doesn't work for us anymore. This is where we tend to have shut down emotionally, and we're holding all of this stuff instead of expanding and letting that expansion be felt. Especially what we don't realize is as we get more advanced and we want to work with certain kinds of people, they feel that difference between being at Walmart or being at Cartier in their interaction with you. They feel it. No matter how well you speak, what words you say, how beautiful your branding is, or how good you get at putting on a show, it is felt. And that's the beautiful thing about energetics, is there is no faking it. You will have these interactions with, say, a potential client, and you say all the right things. You have proof of concept, you have testimonials, you communicate your value, and for some reason, they just don't go with you. And you're like, oh, why? It's because something inside them just went, oh, I don't know if they've got it. I don't know if they've got me. But the beautiful thing about that is that it works in reverse. When we really tune in and we take care of ourselves and we tap into the best of us, we see ourselves in our genius. We know how good we are. You can show up and you can say not the perfect thing. You can completely forget to talk about the testimonials. You can miss details, and people just have this thing. It's just you. I don't know why. It's just you. I just have to work with you. I do a much broader context of working with the unconscious, but I started out as a hypnotherapist, and I used to spend all this time explaining hypnosis to people and trying to make sure they got it. And I realized people were having this thing where they just felt my energy and they were like, I've been looking for someone and it's you. That knowing that it's me is more powerful than any of the things that I can do and say. And I'm not saying that this is an either or thing, because the real power comes when we have the systems and structure and we obviously put the work in and we show up. And on top of that, we're masters of our own energy. When we talk about energetics or sensing this emotional energy with things, we all know that it's there because we feel the same things in people. It's like the friend that's like, I'm fine. Well, clearly you're not fine. I can feel it in your energy. Or they're telling the story about how they're okay or things are okay in their relationship, but something deep inside you just knows that it's not true. The truth is, having to mask things is really kind of a sign of weakness. We avoid when we don't have this sort of strength to say the truth. But powerful people don't need to avoid that. Powerful people say yes when they mean yes, and they say no when they mean no. And there's a kind of safety in that. You never worry that something else might be going on, because you know when they say no, they mean no. And when they say yes, they mean yes. And that's the same thing that people are receiving from your energy. So does your energy say no when you mean no and yes when you mean yes? Or do you show up and you're saying yes, but your energy's saying no? Do you guys feel that? Just like your friend who might be telling the story about everything's great with her husband. Something's inside you. It's like, I feel like you're saying the words, your mouth is speaking and I'm hearing them, but I'm processing something different. And we can't fake that stuff. We can't fake it at all. It's like fortifying our inner world is the magic. When you've had those big seasons of push, have they truly moved you ahead? Sometimes there's short-term gain, but I think in the long term, we are always making a sacrifice. When we look at the statistics around business, most businesses fail after 5 years and all the things, it's because we're not playing a long-term game. We have to play the long-term game. And the long-term game starts here. I'm the long-term game. Because if I burn out and the business is built around me, what am I left with? Nothing. I just jackhammered the foundation of my building, and then I wondered why the building collapsed. I'm the foundation. That's why if I can't thrive in the way that I'm living my life right now, there's no long-term game. And one of the things that I can feel coming up as a point of resistance right now is this rational, yeah, but I have these expenses, and if I don't push, I'm not going to make this. Yeah, but I have this, and if I don't do it like this, I'm not going to make that. Yeah, it's easy for you to say, but I have all of these time constraints. And I totally understand this, because one of the number one things that I work with in the subconscious is we get fixated on how something has to be. I worked with this woman recently who had an online coaching business. The problem that she came with for the session was all about she wanted more revenue. She told me all this stuff about how she didn't enjoy the coaching business and there were all these problems and all these things. But then when I was like, okay, so what's the problem? She said money. And then she went back. You can suggest to someone, well, what if it was something else? But they're so fixated on this one way that it has to be that we can't even see all of the other possibilities. So what I want you to do is ask yourself all of those things that come up for you, all of the yeah, buts. I want you to turn it around and say, yeah, but what if that's not true? Yeah, but what if I'm lying to myself? One of the things our mind does is it gathers evidence for whatever we believe. And so you already have this stack of evidence for what you believe, which is why you believe what you believe. But what if something else was true? Is there a single human being that you know that's living a different way and getting the result that you want? I bet there is. Has there ever been a time in your business where you were operating in a different way and something just came in without all the extra stuff that you feel like you have to put in? Just one piece of evidence. So if that's true and it's happened, maybe the thing that you're so fixated on isn't the only way. And so in the opening to maybe this isn't the only way, can I get into the identity of the successful business owner that I am, of the creative genius that I am, of the one who is creating this multi-million-dollar incredible empire that's going to impact people's lives, impact the world, change my whole way of being? Can I put myself back there for a moment, that place that I never go anymore because I'm so busy? Can I get into that? And from this place, when I remember that I'm a fucking badass, that I'm an entrepreneur, that I've already done things that most people will never do, can I play with possibilities? What if I took whatever it is that I offer and I had added something to my service menu that's 10 times the highest price? What if I did a luxury, exclusive, bespoke thing and sold it to a certain kind of person? What if I just played in possibilities, the what if game? What if I could make an extra $10,000, an extra $100,000 with almost no effort? Seems crazy, but what if? What if I just played with that? When we realize how our mind works, our mind isn't the part of ourselves that comes up with the genius ideas. It comes from our unconscious. How many of you get the best ideas when you're driving or when you're in the shower and you're just kind of doing something else? Your conscious mind is distracted, and so your unconscious is like, oh, I can finally speak and tell you the solution for this thing. It's the same thing as when we're trying to think of a song, you know, that song, like, it'll come to me. And then we start doing something else and we're washing the dishes and we're like, oh, The Power of Love by Celine Dion. That's what it was. It's the same thing with how we access our genius. So when I go into thinking, I'm actually blocking Merlin. I'm actually blocking the most genius part of myself. The way it really works, it's like we phone in a request to our subconscious. It's like we call it in. Please give me the name of that song. Okay, I will wait for your call. We hang up and then we go and we do something else. And then your unconscious calls and goes, I've got it. It's Celine Dion. That's what's really happening. When you start to realize that that's the way your mind works, you can play with that. You don't need to think of the answer. You don't need to mind it. Just float that in the field of possibilities. Call it into your unconscious and wait for the response. Got to have some time in the day, on the weekend, to just be in surrender, because that's when your unconscious, your genius, your Merlin calls and goes, I've got it. Then you receive the brilliance that's going to be what's will exponentially move you along. And the thing is, mentorship and learning and coaching and guidance and strategy is all so valuable. But nobody has access to all of the details of you. Nobody knows exactly where your greatest level of genius is and how exactly you like to operate except for you. And your unconscious understands that far better than you do consciously. So the best, most genius ideas of all are going to come from you. And they're going to really come when you put yourself in containers like this and spaces like this. And when you learn and you go, okay, this person says that, this person says that. Okay, I've got all this stuff in my awareness and this awareness of who I am. Let me call it in and let me see what the genius has to say. Because that really is when we get the life-changing downloads, ideas, pieces of wisdom that come through. The first thing is it's got to be a possibility in your mind. It's like first there's something that you flirt with. Probably the thing that you do now is like that at some point. Like I'm sort of a hobbyist photographer, although I did do it professionally for a hot second. And I remember in the beginning, people were so critical of this idea of doing photography as anything really. And they got the camera and I started doing it. And I remember I didn't even have to put up an ad. People just saw my photos and started asking me for photography. What tends to happen is that we start with this real dreamer, ambitious energy, and then we get to a certain point and we have something, and then fear kicks in. And the fear of losing what we have becomes more powerful than the dream of what could be. And so when we talk about those two states, we allow that to happen. We allow the fear of losing what we have to be more powerful than the dream of what could be. And I know that this is true and very real because of all of the experience that I've had with clients. But I was listening to a neurobiologist the other day, and she was speaking about how in our nervous system, there's basically two states. And she equated it to being like the breakers in a house. She's like, one can be on or the other can be on. They can never both be on at the same time. And what those two circuits in our nervous system represent are fear and hope. And I was like, that's so funny because in my work with clients, I constantly see this thing about the fear of losing what we have and the dream or the hope of what could be. And here's neuroscience, which reinforces so many of the beautiful things that we intuitively know work, reinforcing that. And so the question is, which circuit is active for me most of the time? Fear or hope? Somewhere we get stuck too is we feel guilty after a certain point for wanting more. But change is what stimulates us as human beings. It's why we like to go on vacation. It's why we want new experiences. And so if your whole life in your business is recreating the same experience over and over and over and over, that's probably part of the reason that you don't feel creatively stimulated. And being able to create that same experience over and over is an important part of creating stability and consistency and predictability. But those aren't the things that light up your soul. So can you also get back into that dream and play in those possibilities? What if I did this crazy thing? You did a crazy thing. You already have a business. So you already were crazy once. Could you be brave enough to dream and be crazy again? What if? What if it works? Like, what would it look like? Just play in that field of possibilities, because when you let yourself play, and then when you let yourself live there, you will be shocked at what becomes possible.
My gosh, I love that so much. I'm so grateful for you to come in and talk to our tribe and just love it so much. I think what Michael was talking about related to the conscious thinking part of our brain and the unconscious and the fear and the hope, like all of these themes play so beautifully together. How does that unconscious part of our mind affect our conscious part of our mind and our decision making?
Yeah. So let's do a demonstration,
Okay.
actually. So everyone do this with me. Actually do it because it's going to be really enlightening for you. So why don't you just say your name in your head? That voice in your head, just say your name. Now say your name in your head again. Now yell your name in your head. Yell your name in your head. Now I need to blink with me counting up. So 1 blink, 2 blinks, 3 blinks, 4 blinks, 5 blinks. Now take some deep breaths in. So go deep breath in, exhale. Another deep breath in, exhale. What happened to your blinking while you're breathing? Just continued. And what happened to that voice in your head? You're probably being like, oh shit. Did you say that or did you just hear it? And then now that you're thinking about that, what's happening to your breathing? You're still breathing, but you're not breathing. So your unconscious handles everything that your conscious attention is not on. Where a lot of us get stuck is we're trying to put our conscious attention on moving forward. So say I'm trying to get to this next level of success, or I'm trying to get these clients, and I'm so pushing on this thing, but there's all of this shit in my unconscious that does not agree with that. Like, for example, say I'm trying to date again and I've had my heart broken in the past and maybe there's some trauma. I have this screaming thing in my unconscious that says, love is not safe. So every time I'm not actively focused on my behaviors and every single part of what I'm doing, that unconscious program is running me and actually painting the way that I see reality. So let's just say with the dating analogy, I think that no one good is available, or I think that I'm just going to get rejected. Well, I will see rejection where rejection isn't. Like maybe someone asks me an open-ended question in a dating thing, I'll see it as, oh, they're not really interested, when maybe actually they were, and I just read into it because I see what my unconscious paints for me to see. So there's all of these things that we hold that are invisible that are literally shaping the way that we perceive and interact with the world. A lot of times there's some really limiting thing that someone said in the past, and though they don't consciously believe that, it's in there somewhere. There's past trauma. There's things that get held in our nervous system. When we talk about being in that lit up state where we're magnetic, a lot, like 20% of that is about getting ourselves there, and 80% of it is about letting go of all of the stuff that we've collected along the way.
I think that is really interesting. And then I wanted to ask you, for people that are in our community that have been through a hard year, or even if it isn't just this year, it's sort of a lifelong thing. How do we even begin to heal? Is the question. How do we begin to give ourselves space to get back to phoning Merlin? Because I think it's tough when you're living in that state of pain or frustration or anxiety to access that.
The first thing is deciding to start and really making it a priority. If you don't make it a priority, life will make it a priority for you eventually. It's like your health. People don't prioritize their health until they don't have it, and then it's the only thing that they can think about. It's the same with your emotional well-being, with your mental health, all of those things. This is again where we tell ourselves a lie. Yeah, but I've got to do this. But it's the same thing as you're getting sick and you're like, I'm getting sick, but I can't afford to get sick right now. Like I have all these really important things that I just can't miss. And then sometimes you get so sick, you're just like overcome with fever.
Yeah.
It's like your bones ache and you're just like, suddenly priorities shift. You're like, I'm going to cancel everything because I just can't. And somehow all of those things that it would be the end of the world if you had to reschedule them or cancel them become okay. Well, that's all still available to you now. And so no one can discern the exact things in your life, but all of the things that you tell yourself that the world will end if you were to not do them or not do them a certain way, that thought is why you are in the experience that you're in. And so you've got to start to pull it apart and again, play with those challenging questions like, is this true? How could I do this? How could I make it work? How could I make it a priority?
I love that.
So Sophia asked, how can we work through the fear? And this is such a great question because a lot of advice will tell you just to go to this ultra positive place. But
Mm,
what we've done a lot of the time is that we've compounded it. We've created momentum in our nervous system. And so what we actually need to do first is neutralize. Don't focus on going from extreme fear to extreme hope. Focus on neutralizing the fear.
that's
This will
perfect.
be the worst thing in the world. I could never do that. My life will end if I don't get this client. So let's neutralize that. This might not be great, but I can handle it. If that client doesn't come, another is just around the corner. Like, no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. Do you feel the difference in charge of that? Neutralize.
Well,
I'm going to be fine no matter what. This isn't the end. And then from there, things could actually be good. Like, what if just a little bit more came in? You want to climb this gradient from neutralizing and then going into the positive and compounding that. We try to switch directions when we're too far into the negative and it doesn't work. You've got to neutralize whatever state you're in first before you switch. What we do a lot of the times is we're in this fear state in our body and we sort of know that we should be in a different state. So we give ourselves this pep talk, right? I'm gonna have a really good day today, and I get my extra large Starbucks, and I'm like, hey, okay, it's all gonna be fine, and I'm in this state. But the second something goes wrong, or the second that energy goes, I'm just right back into the fear. That's where we're kind of lying to ourselves, or we're like faking this state instead of actually going in and neutralizing the fear that's in our body and then compounding from a neutral place rather than from like a masking is what it feels like to me. The masking never really works. We just keep feeling like we're climbing up the ladder and then falling off. So Chelsea says, how can I let go of control when growing my team, a wedding planning company? I was a solopreneur for so long and now trusting others with responsibilities that used to be mine is a big hurdle for me. I know I'm getting in the way of my business growth, but I'm still having a hard time truly stepping into the visionary role. The thing about control is that you don't really have any. You don't actually have any control. You're just trying to manufacture control so that you can feel safe. But the control that you're manufacturing isn't making you feel safe. It's just making you feel controlling. Definitely trust and surrender are going to be the things that we want to step into, but it's also the trust and the surrender that like things aren't going to be perfect and people are going to make mistakes. And so the thing that you trust and surrender to isn't that everything's going to be perfect and it's all going to be fine. It's that you are the person that has the capacity to deal with the things as they come up, and that the team members you have chosen are going to do the best that they can, and that together you're going to be able to steer the ship in the right direction. It's like you're the captain of the ship. And so you're trying to deal with all the sails and all the masts and steer. And I don't know what else goes on a ship, but you can't do that. So you're like, I'm just going to be the captain. And you're like, everybody has to be a perfect sailor but like, that's not real. You've got to give people talk. Sometimes people are going to make mistakes. And I know with weddings, it's such a high pressure situation. But again, part of that is the experience you're creating for yourself, for the people that work with you and your clients. I get begged all the time to shoot weddings, and once a year I will do it as a gift for like a very special friend. And one of the things people say whenever I shoot weddings is how much me just being there and a part of the day made it more magical. And one of the reasons is because I go with the flow. Like, I don't need a schedule, don't need stress, don't need any of the things. It's like, it's like we're all good. That energy of it's all going to be okay, of the joy, of the wonderfulness, of this entire business exists to facilitate dream days and the celebration of love. Can you feel that? I literally feel that in my body. My business exists to facilitate the celebration of love, the best days of people's life. That's what we're about.
what you're saying too about just being there. Like we don't have to be perfect in order to be there.
Yeah, the being there is the perfect. I would even reframe what perfection means. If everything has to go perfectly in order for you to be perfect, then that's exhausting. But if the perfection is perfectly dealing with whatever comes, then you have all the power. The flowers don't arrive on time. The groom's father gets drunk and causes a scene. What's the perfect way to deal with that? What if that's your measure of perfection instead of everything going perfectly? Suddenly you can be perfect in every situation. Suddenly all of the power is in you and you don't have to control anything except you and how you show up. And you showing up as a leader, you can lead your team into this mindset, into this energy, into this way of being. What if your whole team knew the perfect way to be was to perfectly deal with whatever comes? Then you're free. You're free from the need of any control because anything that comes up, you have control over it in the way that you respond.
I think part of that too is when you're giving up your perceived control to a team, is trusting that they are able to handle something if it comes up, if it's not perfect. I think a lot of owners or leaders that have a team, they want their team to be prepared for every situation, but that's really not possible or practical. So I think just extending that into the team handling things perfectly. Like there's always multiple ways to handle something. It's never just one way. And as long as it's handled well, I think that's perfect, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes people have more respect for a difficult situation being handled well than they do for things just going perfectly.
That's awesome. Thank you for answering that for Chelsea. I have a couple questions related to some of the things that you said before. One of them was the mask. So you talked about going from fear to hope or from negative energy to positive energy. And I've heard you also in the past talk about the color of emotions, not to try to force ourselves to go from one extreme to the other. Do you think you could share anything about that?
Yeah. So I have this thing called the emotional color wheel. And if you think about a real color wheel, it goes from red to orange to yellow, blue, indigo, green, violet, and it goes around, right? So the color is next to the color and you shift through it. As I really cultivated this relationship with my own emotions, I started to realize that emotions were kind of like this too. And so what I did is multiple times throughout the day, I would have a timer set and check what is the primary emotion that I'm feeling. Is it joy? Is it neutral? Is it sadness? And what I found is that a lot of the times we're feeling a bunch of different things at once. And so it would be like, what is the main thing? Can I feel what just joy feels like? Can I feel what just sadness feels like? And as I became more familiar with the physical sensation of each emotion in its purest form, what I became aware of is that we move through emotions like we would move through a color wheel. So you don't just go from red to blue, you've got to go through orange, yellow, green. Sometimes we try to jump the color wheel. We try to go from fear to hope or from sad to happy. And we're like, I just want to try to force myself out of this experience. Our nervous systems and our bodies are literally designed to process emotion, particularly negative or uncomfortable emotions. What trauma really is that we had emotional experiences in the past that we didn't have the capacity to process at that time. So when you're like 7 and your parents are screaming and fighting and being crazy, your nervous system can't process that. So it stores it. A lot of us have this relationship with negative emotion where we just avoid it instead of processing it. But the way to move through the color wheel, the way that we're meant to, is to actually process the emotion that we're in. So if I'm sad, it's not to get really busy and just mask the sadness and put some makeup on and go, I'm not going to do that. It's to actually tune into the sadness. We never cry forever. Have you ever been so sad from a breakup or a loss or even just a sad movie that you're like crying and crying and then a point comes and you can't cry anymore? It's because your nervous system has processed that. Very often we try to escape from an uncomfortable emotion by jumping the emotional color wheel instead of letting ourselves sit and process whatever is. And what happens is as we process what is, we move from a red to orange, orange to yellow. We move from sadness to apathy to like a neutral state to a little bit of complacency and then up and then suddenly we're in joy before we realize it, and then there's nothing to mask because you've actually shifted your emotional state to where you want to be, not by trying to escape from where you are, but by actually being with yourself with where you are. That will help you move that emotional state where there's nothing underneath it, because the problem that gets created is when we're trying to exist at one frequency but our truth, like our body, is actually somewhere else. And that's where a lot of us are when we're in that busy, busy, busy. It was you literally have the experience of being more in your head and disconnected from your body versus like my whole body, my whole being is in this one emotion, this one frequency. And when we talked about people feeling the yeses and nos in our energy, where the powerful person and the confidence says yes when they mean yes and no when they mean no, part of that is my whole energy is either in one state or it's in the other state. It's not like I've convinced myself to be happy and peppy for this sales call, but my body's actually still grieving for this thing.
That's amazing. And that's a lot of the work that I've been doing with Michael behind the scenes this year. Oftentimes see a lot of people operating in the mind space, like the go, go, go. I'm going to deal with this later, push this under the rug. Like, I'm not going to go there. And then what will happen is at a certain point, you'll crash. Is there any practice or thoughtfulness or mindfulness that we can incorporate so that we are giving ourselves space more on a daily basis and not just waiting for the crash or not necessarily just pushing through until we can't push anymore?
So I'm actually going to start with a more neuroscience perspective on this one. The modern world really messes up our dopamine pathways, which is our biological reward system. I know we all have businesses that are on social media, but I would really limit the amount of screen time, the amount of social media, the amount of sugar, the amount of caffeine. I know we don't like hearing that one, just the amount of artificial stimulation. And in particular, in the morning, if your morning looks like reaching for your phone or work emails within the first 90 minutes of waking up, you got to get rid of that. We move through basically a more suggestible state in the morning and when we're falling asleep. And whatever we put in that state is kind of like will stick. So I would really encourage you to, particularly in the mornings, even if you have to wake up half an hour earlier and just meditate if that calls to you, or just be with yourself and be intentional, really get yourself in that better emotional state before the day starts. And then the other part is building this relationship with our body. So you don't need a lot of time. I'll show you right now. So just really drop in and see what you can hear. See the sound that you can hear the furthest away. Now, what's the closest sound that you can hear to you? Now, just for a second, focus on the sound of my voice. Really notice the tone, the timbre, like really hear the quality of my voice. And now for a second, just listen to the sound of your own breathing. Who noticed some kind of change in their body and their being? So you can do this with seeing, with hearing. If you do that 5 times a day and you build this relationship with getting physically into your body, that will start to really change your life and your awareness.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to add to that for myself was that when Michael talks about the surrender, one of the things I learned from you that I would love to share with everyone is to go there. What if I don't close a client? What if my business takes a hit before it goes forward? And so allowing myself to really go to the place of true surrender, even at the worst, was very helpful for me to be able to go from the red to the orange to the yellow.
I love that you shared that because that's one of my favorite things. And that's kind of like the flip side. So the other way to deal with the fear is if the neutralizing doesn't feel like it's working, it's to go to that absolute worst case scenario and realize that you'll be okay. Basically, the fear has so much power because we've put it on a pedestal. And so it's like, this can't happen. Like, I can't get divorced. And then you think about it all the time. Every decision you make is from the fear of not getting divorced, or it's like, I can't not land this client. And then every decision you make is from the fear of not landing that client. But it's because you've put that on such a pedestal. And when you take it off, you're like, if this happens, it will suck, but I will be fine. Suddenly it diminishes the power that it has. And so it's easier to move from that fear state to that state of hope.
It's definitely a shift. So I love that. And Larissa has a couple questions for you.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much, Michael. I feel so grounded right now because there's so much energetic that is happening. I really feel it in my body. And I'm sure all the people that are watching are feeling it too. So
I'm so
I do
glad.
have a couple of questions here. And I love that you went into the stages of the King, Queen, and Merlin energies. And you mentioned in the beginning when people are starting off and building their business with King energy, learning how to do that in the beginning and then eventually transitioning to ruling their kingdom with Queen and Merlin energy.
Mm.
So, like, when do you know it is the right time in your business to switch from king to queen and Merlin energy?
Because you reach a point where you're maxed out on time, you're maxed out on resources, and you're trying to scale, but working harder and working more just isn't possible and feasible. Well, ideally, it'd be just before you get to that point. The king builds in what's predictable, in what's like this, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. The queen energy is what compounds. Another way to think about this is people will say you get paid for what you do, and then you get paid for what you know, and then you get paid for who you are. And so the queen energy is very much about shifting into the what you know and who you are. Say I'm a photographer, people hire you in the beginning just because they need a photographer. But then you have a name and a reputation, and then it's like, then you're Michael Edwards. And people aren't hiring a photographer, they're hiring Michael Edwards. So then this is where we move into the identity. This is where we move into being a category of one, right? So I used to be an RTT hypnotherapist. And so people came to me because they wanted this kind of hypnotherapy. And then I got more known and I started to work with all these different things. And it became a session with Michael Edwards. Like no one does exactly what I do. So people don't come to me for the thing that I do anymore. They come to me for who I am. But I have to step into that. That's where I talk about the queen energy being like the energy amplifying the energy of rulership. It's like, I can't be like, well, I'm a hypnotherapist. I've got to step into it. I'm Michael frickin' Edwards. And I'm one of a kind, one of a kind. And one of a kind things are priced like one of a kind things. And so you'll know where you are in that journey because that's what will be happening. Like, do people recognize who you are? Are people coming to you because of what you know, or are they coming to you because of who you are? And as you grow through that, we play with these different energies, and that's where bigger opportunities become available, right? That's where you can teach pieces of what you do, and that's also where teaching what you do will also bring in more clients. For example, Chelsea could have a component of her business where she teaches other people to run a wedding planning company, and in doing that, she's actually establishing herself as an authority, which will make more people seek her to be regular clients because she's someone that teaches other people to do what she does. Understanding where you are on that ladder might also help you understand where you are in relation to those energies.
I have a little piece to add to that, Michael. When I think of king energy, the king is going to build the foundations. And there are certain pieces that every business owner has to have in place in order for the business to function well. Sometimes they're very minimal, sometimes there's more layers to it. But one thing that we teach about in our world that I think bridges the gap between the king and the queen is branding. That will actually help you discover your queen energy. Because a lot of times we've worked with clients that have been in business for 20 years and they haven't gone through the process of visual branding. They never have had someone look at them from an outsider's perspective to say, these are your strengths. This is why people come to you. And so sometimes it's very hard to discover that on your own. I think what is so important about branding is for you to see your own power within yourself, like to see who you are, what makes you unique, what makes you stand out, but then also to allow other people to see it. And if you can't see it yourself, how can other people see it? So there's this transformative process of knowing your own genius, of trusting and believing in who you are that can be uncovered through that branding process and then sharing that with the world. That branding piece is really essential to go from that king space to that queen space because if nobody can really see who you are, then it doesn't matter if you are that. But there's pieces in your business that are king energy that you have to have, like your processes, your systems, the client experience process that you take people through, the services, your offers. If you don't have those assets in your business, it's very hard to live in the queen space. You shouldn't rob yourself of accessing the queen and the Merlin, but also know that, like, okay, I'm having a hard time being in queen because people don't get what I do. That's a logical answer to that, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, and I love what you said because we see a lot of entrepreneurs and creatives struggle with protecting their energy. So you both touched on it earlier, where maybe sometimes they may let themselves fall into the king energy for a very long time to build foundations, or maybe they give too much of themselves to accommodate and help everyone that there isn't much left to help themselves. So, what are some practices that you would recommend to maintain both a visionary and a productive energy state, especially when there's a lot of challenging situations?
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a good question. And I think we tend to have a very immature relationship with rest and what is nourishing. And so a lot of times when we talk about self-care, it's like, I'm going to stop all productive things and I'm just going to go lay in bed, or I'm just going to go float on a lily pad at a spa. And it's like, that's not it. There are a variety of things that you can do that require different levels of mental intensity, that have different levels of demand on you and are different levels of nourishing. And so two of the best things that you can do, actually, one is to really map your energy through the day and understand where you have the most resource and what ways. So I'll give you an example. So for me, first thing in the morning, I get these content ideas really easily and I will write them down. Then around between 10 a.m. and noon, I have the most willpower. So dealing with stuff that I don't want to do, responding to difficult emails, dealing with back end and taxes and just stuff that you don't really want to do. That's that time. Then around like 2, I get tired and I let myself not have to work from like 2 to 4 if I don't have clients. And I will very often go for a dog walk at that point or go and be in nature, maybe listen to a podcast or something. And then something that took me a very long time to realize is that if I take more time off, I get very, very creative. I like I'm the most creative at night. And so when I changed my schedule and I just allowed myself to work on my business at night, that's when I write my website. That's when I do graphic design. That's when I write like really brilliant copy. And so although you might not always be able to schedule your day exactly that way, if you can at least understand how you move through the day, I think about it like heat mapping my energy and then trying to line up my schedule as much to that. So that really helps reduce the amount that you're depleting of yourself. Say you have to write an admin email and you're like not in the vibe, it can be the most exhausting experience. And then the other side of that is just noticing what nourishes you and what depletes you and how can you weave it in. Like when you're done, you don't have to be done for the day. Sometimes it's just going outside or getting some food or working on something else actually can be super nourishing. Sometimes connecting to the vision, sometimes watching an old testimonial. Like people think they need a month off. You don't need it. Erica said that to me when I started. She's like, I just need a month off. No, you don't. Because after the month, you're just going to recreate the same situation in your life. What you need to learn is to operate in the way that you imagine that you would feel after the month off in the actual life that you have. Let's say my battery drain throughout the day is at a consistent level, but then when I'm pushing against something, it's like 4 times as fast. So if I'm tuning into something that I'm not resourced for, it's like I'm 4 times draining the battery. Whereas if I actually go get a snack and I think about it and I look at sales that are doing really well and I think about my vision, it gets me reconnected to that. And then I might have the energy to go back in and finish that thing. So I have this thing for me, I push, but I don't force. I push myself to do stuff. Otherwise, the things that I need to do in business won't get done. But when there's this absolute feeling of death exhaustion in my body, I don't force myself to do it unless I have like a client or something, but that doesn't usually happen. I feel like when we can get into more of a sense of play with our time, we are able to get the nourishment that we think we need from these huge amounts of time off, actually from just little tweaks. And there's a lot of science around this too about how we should work for 45 minutes and then take a rest. And then after 2 hours, we should always have an interrupt and a break. I think you've got to find your way. And it also depends how ADHD you are, because if you have ADHD, hyperfocus can be really powerful and you don't want to task switch too much. Injecting a sense of play more than anything into your day will probably alleviate a lot of where it feels like this massive energy drain. And if there's this thing coming up in your head right now, so that's nice for you to say, but I have all this pressure and all these people, that's where to bring in the how. How could I bring in a sense of play? How could there be a sense of play with my team? Like, how could there be a sense of play with everyone? Entrepreneurship gets to be fun. Building your business gets to be fun.
And I think part of that is reclaiming your time, your energy, and your space and doing it for yourself because no one's ever going to do that for you. So like Michael said, seeing when you're good at specific tasks throughout the day, when things make sense for you to do them, and not just the day, like sometimes the week. I know for myself, I'm really good with client calls and broadcasts on Monday and Tuesday. By the time I get to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I need to be working on more behind the scene things. It doesn't always have to be like a day, it can be a week or a month. And I prioritize that space for that. Nobody can come in and tell you, you're good at this time of day. Only you will know that. So I think that's really important. And I love how Michael says the heat mapping because it is particular to you. And then secondarily to that, you have to be the one to allow yourself to do that. And Nikki just asked one question. So Nikki is asking any advice for those of us who are still juggling full-time jobs and entrepreneurship. I know that it's a choice, but curious for insights. I love that question.
Yeah, just really being so intentional about not letting yourself tell a victim story and really being like, I've chosen this and I have chosen to feel great about this, and having that be the only narrative. I chose this because I'm a visionary and I can see what I am building. This did not happen to me. Entrepreneurship was not forced on me. I'm not like, I should say I feel attacked, but I know to say this because I know how people think. Like, you're not alone. Everybody does the same thing. And so it's like really holding that story of I chose this. And also we can do things when we know that they're not permanent. So when I let myself fall into the everyday and it feels like this is going to be forever, that can feel disempowering. But when I hold the bigger vision of I'm doing this now so that in the future I can reap the rewards, the awareness that this isn't going to be forever really helps us move through that.
Tagging on to that, the choice that you are an artist, Nikki. She's an amazing musician. Rather than focusing on, I have this job and I have this passion and I have these two things, it's like when you're in the artist mode, how can you feel that feeling of, I get to do this? This is who I am. This is what I'm meant for. And living in that space and really feeling into that space. And with your job, it's your job and you can do it. There's some people that are entrepreneurs and have a job for a long time. So I think there's some really powerful things about having a career or having a job alongside of being an entrepreneur. You get to have a consistent income. You get to have security that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have. So I think focusing on what you get from both sides is great. Not just that you have to do both, but that you get to do both, I think is awesome.
Yeah, and play with that bigger vision, being like, one day I'm going to be playing on world-class stages and I'm going to tell the story of how I played this night wherever you are. Like Ed Sheeran said, what's the big stadium in London? He was like, I'm going to play there one day when he was playing in bars and he was just with his guitar. And then he was there. And same thing, Lindsey Sterling, who is the violinist that
Wembley,
does like this
Nikki said,
dance.
it's Wembley.
Wembley, yes,
Yeah,
Wembley. He's
that's
like,
it.
I'm going to be at Wembley. And then he was there in Wembley Stadium. Same thing, Lindsey Sterling was denied on, I don't know if it was America's Got Talent or whatever show, but they were like, no, you're not good enough. And she has her own show now and tours the world playing the violin and dancing. Like, those are the pieces of evidence to feed your mind. That's going to be me. I am going to be on that stage. I'm going to have my own show. I'm going to look back and tell the story of this time of how I kept going and I never gave up. And if you can be that future you and bring that into the now, then success will be your destiny.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I'm just gonna get all the snaps. I'm gonna tag one more thing onto that because I think it's so important for artists is your social media is your stage. Your Instagram is like your way to have your future you on stage now. You can take that time, you can take that space, you can go into the middle of a field and play your violin. You can bring your violin anywhere and you can show people what you want them to see. You can show them the future you. You can show them your artistry, and that's what social media is for. I think that's something that a lot of people forget is you have the world at your fingertips and you can be the future you right now.
Yeah. And for everyone, tap into the field of possibilities, tap in to the scariest dream, like the biggest dream that you have. Tap into that and show up like it's certain. Show up like you're going to be that no matter what. No matter what, I will be this because I have this dream inside my soul, and there is nothing that will stop me from getting there. People that do the great things in life, they're not special because they were talented and sure had all the skills, but it's the ones who are just like, they never let people shake them. They never let the doubt overcome the dream and the vision. Everyone has hard moments, but in the big picture, it's this energy of no matter what, you came here to do something extraordinary. So believe in yourself all the way, all the freaking way through, and decide that you are going to show up for yourself and make your dream a reality no matter what. No matter what.
Yeah. And you don't just do it because you're something else. You
You
do it
are
because
it.
you are it. Exactly. It
You
is you.
are it. This is how
Regardless.
manifestation works. People think about manifestation in terms of, what do I want? Let me think about what I want. But how manifestation actually works is, what does what I want want? So if I want to be on Wembley Stadium, what do all of the people in that audience want? They want a performance that's going to move their souls.
Mm.
So how do I become the performer in me that moves their souls? I want this brilliant, great, amazing partner. Well, what does this brilliant, great, amazing partner want? They want someone who's also brilliant and great and amazing and has their shit together. So how do I become the version of myself who's great and amazing and has their shit together? That's how you match. That's the energetic match. That's how you manifest. What does what I want want? And how do I become the version of myself that's a match for that? That's how you create your dreams. It's in the becoming that you become the match for all the things that you desire.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Michael. And just to pull this right back around to the beginning, if you guys remember when Michael said, when you started your business, you were in touch with that visionary part of yourself, the person who is a wedding planner, the person who is a world-class business coach, the person who is on a stage with thousands in the audience, performing in the top places for the top people. You had that vision. You just forgot about it. You just forgot about it while you were so busy hustling. So give yourself space to reconnect. And Michael, thank you so much for coming in here and for breathing fire into all of us. We love it so much. We love you so much. And hopefully you all enjoyed this. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can definitely connect with Michael on social media. And we just wanted to thank you so much, Michael, for coming in, talking with us today.
It is my absolute honor and pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we'll see you guys all soon.
Bye.